Well, hello, good evening. My name is Carla Sales, and I'm the Vice President of Local Public Affairs at Southern California Edison. A couple of housekeeping items while participants are still trickling in. To add closed captioning, please click the three dots found at the top right of the toolbar. In the drop-down menu, you can select Turn on Live Captions. Please note that the Q&A feature will be available for comments and questions throughout the presentation. We recommend you use them. To use it, you can click on the Q&A button at the top of your screen, and the feature will be available to select Ask a Question. You type in your question, and we will answer all of the relevant questions during the Q&A portion of the program. As you're reading the questions on the side of your screen, you may also upvote items you wish to have answered by clicking the icons with the up and down arrows. We will answer as many questions as we can. Due to the volume of attendees and questions, the raise your hand feature will not be utilized during the meeting. Next slide, please. Thank you again for joining us tonight for the Wildfire Safety Community Meeting. We're here tonight to discuss the recent changes to our public safety power shutoffs, PSPS for short, criteria that have impacted you over the last few weeks. We've heard your concerns and those shared with us by Supervisor Peters, State Senator Grove, as well as local chamber partners like Kernville Chamber, Kern River Valley Chamber, and the Boatfish Property Owners Association, as well as the Three Rivers community. We deeply appreciate all of you who have taken the time to share your feedback with us. It continues to help us improve our operations because we know that losing power for any amount of time is a hardship. And while it's frustrating and inconvenient, we have a responsibility to keep you safe from devastating impacts of wildfires like the ones we've seen earlier this year. We're hosting this town hall meeting tonight to answer questions and share resources that you may find helpful. We've reviewed questions that have been submitted in advance and are appreciative to those who have shared them. We've structured this presentation to try to address some of those questions proactively. As you see from the agenda on the screen, we're joined today by senior company leaders and subject matter experts who will share information about the conditions we closely monitor and evaluate while making PSPS decisions. We'll also update you on our efforts to strengthen the grid in Kern and Tulare counties in an effort to reduce some of the PSPS impacts and share information about customer programs and resources. But first, we're going to start with safety. Next slide, please. Safety is Edison's #1 priority, so we start every meeting with a safety moment. Today, I'd like to speak to you about safety near downed power wires. During PSPS events like the ones we saw in January, we identified over 90 instances of damage in areas that had been de-energized for PSPS, including those depicted in this picture. If you encounter a downed power wire, stay away and call 911. As always, assume a downed power wire is energized and dangerous. Stay clear of anything contacting downed power wires, including fences, trees, cables, phone lines, and the ground, and it's best to stay about 100 feet away. Objects and vegetation can mask visibility, so please use extreme caution. Also be careful when using water to fight nearby fires. If you must use water, use a mist or a spray, not a stream, as it can create a clear path for electric current. If you encounter a downed power wire on or near a vehicle, do not touch or enter the vehicle. If it's safe to do so, instruct occupants to drive away or remain inside until help arrives. If escape is necessary, victims should jump clear without touching the vehicle and ground simultaneously. Land with feet together and shuffle away. Wait for emergency responders if victims are unable to exit safely. With that, I'll turn it over to our first presenter, my colleague Tom Rolinski, who's going to provide you an overview of weather and fire science that inform our PSPS decision making. Thank you. Tom?
All right, well, thank you, Carla, and good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. My name is Tom Rolinski. I'm the fire science expert with Southern California Edison, and I want to walk you through a few slides here that are going to talk a little bit about our weather forecasting capability. So if we can have the next slide, please. Okay. So again, I want to talk to you just for a few minutes a little bit about our weather forecasting capabilities We actually model the weather conditions and fuel conditions in-house. We have all of our in-house weather modeling and fuels modeling that really helps shape our to determine if we're going to have a PSPS event or not. And so I want to talk about a couple of different aspects here. First of all, we have a team of meteorologists that look at all those weather forecasts. And then we also have a team of fire experts that look at all the fuel conditions. And together, those teams work in tandem to determine the areas that may potentially be affected by a PSPS event. So we use two things. One is we use weather forecasts, and then we also use weather observations. And I'm going to explain the two in just a minute here. But the weather forecasts are used to scope those PSPS events. So in other words, we use the weather forecast to determine what circuits may be in scope for PSPS and for how long and for what time period. But for us to have a PSPS event, we have to have both the weather and the fuels. Those need to be in alignment for us to have a PSPS event. So one or the other is not enough. We have to have both that need to come into alignment for us to do PSPS. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that comes up very frequently here is why is my power being turned off when the National Weather Service is not mentioning anything about strong winds? And I think that's a very fair question to ask. There's a good explanation for that. The main reason here is because the National Weather Service is looking at these large-scale weather events, and they're forecasting for the general public, and they're forecasting for large areas. Whereas the utility, for us, SCE, is looking at more localized wind events, and we're focused on our what the weather is doing or is forecast to do at that circuit level. So we're looking at very localized areas and localized conditions, whereas the Weather Service is looking at, again, broad, larger scale weather events. So there are cases where we might be turning the power off in situations where the Weather Service doesn't have a red flag warning out, or the Weather Service doesn't have a wind advisory, or there's just no mention of strong winds in their forecast. And that's the primarily the reason why, is because basically Weather Service is looking at big picture, and Southern California Edison is looking at the small localized area. I want to just call your attention to a few graphics here on the screen. I don't want to get caught up on the numbers in the text on the left here, but what I want to point out is the other thing that the reason why there may be a difference between our forecast and the National Weather Service is that all the models that we look at are at a very fine resolution. So they pick up a lot of detail in the weather forecast. Whereas again, the National Weather Service is looking at these bigger areas, so their model resolutions are coarser. They're not looking at as much detail. And it's not that we're any better than the National Weather Service. It's just that our focus is very different from the National Weather Service. And so what you're seeing here on the screen, there's 4 images. On the top left, it's showing an example of a forecast that comes from the National Weather Service, and you can see the resolution is kind of coarse. And then we've got 3 other images on the rest of the screen here that show forecasts from our in-house weather modeling, and it's at finer resolution, so it's going to pick up those details a little bit better than what the National Weather Service is seeing. Again, we're not any better than the National Weather Service, we just have a different focus. And so I wanted to just call your attention to the different kinds of forecasts that we have available to us. We're looking at multiple models that, when they all converge on a similar solution, then we have a high confidence that scenario is going to play out versus just looking at one model. So we look at a lot of different models. The Weather Service does too, but again, the focus is different with the National Weather Service. Next slide, please. So the other aspect, I talked a little bit about the forecasting. But the other aspect is weather observations. And we have over 1,800 weather stations that have been installed across our infrastructure in our high fire risk areas. In the Lake Isabella area alone, there's at least 10 weather stations. And the reason why we have so many weather stations is because, again, we're trying to be dialed into those sort of just those fine-tuned areas and to look at the local conditions. And we do that because if we don't have to turn off the entire circuit, we won't. And so we're looking at, we've installed weather stations along multiple portions of a circuit. And if only one of those weather stations is hitting our criteria for us to turn off the power, then we'll only turn off the power for that circuit segment, that area, instead of turning off the power for the whole circuit. So in the case here, just to show you a couple of examples of how the weather, I know you're familiar with the weather, obviously, in your own area, but when we start to look at the weather stations here, on the left is an example of on the southern end of Lake Isabella, you can see there's a great difference between wind speeds in two stations that are very close together. And at other times, so that's one example. And then on the right is another example where those two weather stations were showing very similar conditions. So it's very, we know the winds are very fickle in these complex terrain areas, and so we're always monitoring those conditions. So we use weather forecasts to scope in circuits to determine our PSPS event. We use weather stations to actually make those de-energization decisions. So the decision to turn off the power is based not on a forecast, but it's based on actual observations. And all of our weather stations are in place so that we can help better make those decisions to turn off the power for as short a period of time as possible. And by the way, all of those weather stations, those are available to the public, so you can access all of those weather stations, and you can monitor along with us when we're in a public safety power shutoff event. Next slide, please. Okay, so I just sort of kind of wrap up my little section here. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we can expect for the rest of our fire season, the weather for the next several months here. In the Lake Isabella area, the Sierra foothills area, basically, we're not expecting any more widespread precipitation. All the winter rains obviously are long gone. And basically what we're left with is those summertime thunderstorms that can occur periodically in the mountains there. We're not expecting a lot of activity, at least for July, but we may see an uptick in those thunderstorm type of activity as we get into August. But again, that's not going to bring a significant amount of precipitation. As you know, it's just the kind of the localized rainfall that you have there. Temperatures are going to be warmer than normal this summer across really the entire area of the Sierra foothills and the Tehachapi Mountains. We do have drought conditions that have returned to much of Southern California, including parts of the Sierra foothills and Tehachapi Mountains. Right now, just kind of abnormally dry, but we do expect those drought conditions to worsen across the area and spread northward. So you can see on the map there on the right illustrating that. And just to talk a little bit about the vegetation in the area, it's obviously the grasses, which is mostly your area, I know, is mostly comprised of grassland areas, some oak woodlands, but mostly grasses. Those are obviously all completely dry and ready to burn. In fact, we've been seeing a lot of fire activity in your area recently, and even the Fay fire that started yesterday afternoon. Just really a testimony to how dry the vegetation is, and the fact that the area is so prone to having destructive wildfires this time of the year. So that's what we want to prevent. And so our fire activity is going to continue to increase across the area as the rest of July and August wear on here. And unfortunately, we're going to continue to see the possibility for some small PSPS events during those localized windy periods. So again, just want to be um, mindful of that. Again, we're looking at those localized conditions, and we're certainly going to have the potential for PSPS once those winds, if those winds do flare up from time to time. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to go ahead and pass this this off to my colleague Shinjini, and she's going to take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'm actually going to pop in really quickly before Shinjini for those attendees who joined after the presentation started. I wanted to just note for the group that we are using the Q&A function at the top. So if you click the top of the screen, there's a Q&A, and you're welcome to post your questions or comments in those chat functions, and they will be published. We're not using the raise hand feature, so please post your questions and comments in the chat. You're also able to select the up or down button for questions or comments that you agree with or want to promote. So please go ahead and use that feature. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom and Carla. Good evening, everyone. I'm Shinjini Menon, Senior Vice President of System Planning and Engineering at Southern California Edison. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I will go over the updates for wildfire mitigation work, both PSPS and grid hardening. We know what's top of mind for you are the PSPS outages. I'll just say, as the leader of the engineering teams here, I spend significant amount of time trying to figure out ways to reduce outages that our customers experience. But the other part of my job is to reduce the risk of wildfires. And one of the tools to reduce the risk of fires is the de-energizations during fire weather conditions, which is an option of last resort. I know outages are tough. I'm a SCE customer myself, and I've experienced my share of frequent outages. There was a period not too far back, 15-month period, where I experienced more than 17 outages, if I counted them right. And also, I'll say, not just on the residential side, my husband is a small business owner, and we have experienced firsthand the impact of these outages. I work here, and I was still frustrated. I know the PSPS outages have been extremely disruptive. Turning off power is a very difficult decision for us, but unfortunately a necessary decision that we have to make sometimes. The last several years have underscored that ensuring public safety at times is much more important than maintaining uninterrupted service. And as you heard Tom say, we are expecting active fire weather this year. Public safety power shutoffs are used only when necessary to protect lives and communities during extreme weather and wildfire risk. Let me spend a minute on our PSPS operations. Next slide, please. To de-energize a circuit for PSPS, we look at two separate criteria. The first is what we call Fire Potential Index, or FPI, which considers how significant a fire could be or could become based on vegetation moisture, humidity in the air, and wind. And the second criteria is the wind speed itself, where we start to have concerns about sparks from our infrastructure due to things like, trees falling on the lines, or lines clashing, or something blowing into our lines. How the lines are built and connected in an area also come into play. The wind speed threshold for PSPS are higher for covered conductor compared to the wind speed thresholds for bare conductors. Covered conductors are those that have some insulation on it that we have started deploying over the last several years. If any portion of the circuit segment in question has bare conductor, we use the threshold for bare conductor to determine when to de-energize. Other than the circuit configuration, things that come into play are the health of the circuit and the environmental conditions on the ground at the time. Next slide, please. So we have had the basics of our PSPS protocols in place for a few years, and they basically remain the same. But every year we reassess our criteria and our protocols based on the latest risk and the updates that have been made to our system. This year, some communities in scope for PSPS are being impacted by more outages, and you have experienced this. So let me explain why this is happening and also what we are doing about it. One of the biggest drivers for increased PSPS this season has been increased potential for fires and fire spreading dangerously. One of the big reasons is the lack of any meaningful precipitation for over a year. It is dry out there. The grasses and brush have accumulated and are very dry, and any spark can spread very quickly. The second reason is lessons learned about firefighting capability when multiple fires are going on. Firefighting resources are spread thin at times, and the potential for fire spreading under these conditions is also high. As Tom was saying, the risk of fires is very present in Tulare and Kern, and indeed in all of California. You're probably seeing it yourselves. The fires that we've experienced have been mostly small and not associated with electrical equipment. However, this increased risk of fires is translating to more PSPS outages as well, especially in locations, as I said, that are dry and windy. Besides the updated FPI, the Fire Potential Index, and how we apply it, we also regularly reevaluate if the high fire risk area boundaries need to change. That is, are there locations that are previously not deemed high fire risk have now become high fire risk areas, or vice versa? We have added several circuits to our high fire risk area list, but these changes do not substantially impact your locations. We have made some other changes as well, such as expanding the buffer zone around the high fire risk areas because fires can spread pretty quickly. And we are also monitoring weather more closely 24/7 so that we can respond quickly if any extreme weather conditions show up. In these instances, it is unlikely that we'll have time to notify the customers in advance of a shutoff, but we'll follow up with notification as soon as possible if it occurs. Next slide, please. I know many of you are part of a well-informed audience, so please bear with me as I get into a little bit of technical detail. I'm hoping it'll help you better understand the PSPS impacts recently and what measures we are taking. My engineering team is working with several of my colleagues in SCE, combing through each section of the circuits to see what we can do immediately to provide some relief and what some long-term solutions are. I'll start with the tungsten circuit, which is fed from the Isabella substation in the town of Lake Isabella. It serves power to the northeastern part of the town, as well as communities of Mountain Mesa, Squirrel Mountain Valley, and South Lake to the east. On this image that you can see on the screen, you can see the Isabella substation in the green box, in the square box, and you can see the tungsten circuit represented by the bolded lines going out to the top and right. Each segment of the circuit is a different color when you see the light green, dark green, yellow, etc. You can also see the neighboring circuits shown by the gray lines towards the left and the right. The other thing I'll point your attention to are the weather stations represented by the small yellow circles. Lastly, the orange and red background colors in this slide represent the Tier 2 or elevated fire risk and the Tier 3 extreme high fire risk areas, and these are defined by the California Public Utility Commission. I just want to orient you to the slide before I get into the details, but the important thing to note here is that the highest winds we see on this circuit, on the tungsten circuit, tend to be at the SCE Paradise Cove GC weather station, which is shown with the black arrow. Because utility flows from the substation towards the end of the wire, of the line, when we have to de-energize this segment where the weather station is, it also affects all the communities to the east. Next slide, please. This slide shows the measured wind speeds for the 10-day period where people on this circuit were impacted by multiple PSPS outages. The horizontal green line is for wind speed of 30 miles per hour, and the horizontal orange line that you see is for 45 miles per hour, which is for wind gusts. And then you see a couple of jagged lines, bold jagged lines, which are the observed wind speeds at the green one for sustained speeds, and then the orange one for wind gusts. And you can see that the weather station recorded sustained wind speeds above 30 miles per hour and gusts above 45 miles per hour multiple times. The fire potential index I mentioned before was also high because of the dry vegetation buildup. Since the circuit has segments with bare conductor, those wind speeds exceed our de-energization criteria. It did it multiple times over this 10-day period. We have installed 4 miles of covered conductor on the circuit, and an additional 20 miles will be completed this year. We'll also complete undergrounding a portion along the main road along Highway 178 by next year, which will complete the hardening on this particular circuit. Once this is done, the wind speed triggers will be higher, and if the same weather pattern is experienced, there would only be just one outage. In the immediate term, we installed a new weather station and some additional equipment, and these changes help us keep customers in Mountain Mesa, Squirrel Mountain Valley, and South Lake energized by using one of the neighboring circuits to the east, where the winds are typically not as strong. And this actually helped to reduce the number of customers impacted during one of the de-energizations last month and another one earlier this month. Next slide, please. I'll quickly cover the details on a couple more circuits. North of Lake, we have the Bonanza circuit, which serves mostly the town of Kernville. And the layout of this map is very similar to the one I showed before. When, again, you see that there is the bright green square, which is the Kernville substation towards the north of the town. That's also where the recorded wind speeds are the highest, and where the yellow circle is with a black arrow. So when the segment of this circuit near the substation is de-energized, all the segments to the south are de-energized as well. For this particular circuit, 39 miles of covered conductor has been installed, and the remainder of the circuit will be hardened by the end of the year. Crews have been working in that area all year. If the same weather pattern is experienced, there'll be significantly reduced PSPS. Next slide, please. The last circuit I wanted to quickly touch on is the Poly circuit in Tulare County, which is in the Three Rivers east of Lake Kawea, or in Tulare. On this map, you can see how the Poly circuit traverses out into some very rural and rugged areas. While PSPS isn't common here, outages sometimes last longer due to how long it takes for our resources to complete a patrol before re-energizing our lines. SC has already installed close to 9 miles of covered conductor on this circuit in 2025, with plans to install another 35 miles by the end of the year and to fully harden the circuit by 2027. We are also looking into adding a weather station, which will allow more granularity that Tom was talking about, so that we need to de-energize smaller portions depending on how the weather is. Next slide, please. I will shift gears and talk quickly a little bit about the grid hardening work that's ongoing, and we have been doing it for several years, because this can help reduce the risk of wildfires, and with that, the frequency on impact of PSPS outages. One of the big things that we have been doing is the replacing bare conductor with covered conductor, as I mentioned. One of the biggest challenges that we have are things like metallic balloons, tree branches, etc., coming into contact with their lines, causing faults and sparks. We have, this really is a big program because we can install these relatively quickly. It costs significantly less than undergrounding, and once installed, we can raise the wind speeds. So far, we have installed about 6,500 circuit miles of covered conductor, which covers more than 2/3 of our SCE area, which are in high fire risk and have overhead circuits. We are doing a whole bunch of other things that I can get into more details as needed, but I'll quickly go to the next slide because in keeping time in mind on what is being done in your particular locations. In terms of grid hardening in Kern County, so far we have completed more than 1,100 miles of covered conductor and have plans to install 92 more miles. We are planning to underground 2 miles of distribution lines, and we anticipate that construction starting in mid next year. And then apart from the grid hardening, there's a whole bunch of other equipment that we're installing that also helps reducing the risk of wildfires and also PSPS. Those details are on the right of the slide. And then going to the next slide on Tulare County, the numbers here, we have completed about 260 miles of covered conductor and have plans to install 82 more miles. We are planning to underground 19 miles of distribution lines here. And then we have, again, installed a whole bunch of other equipment, such as switches, et cetera, and so that, again, to reduce the risk of fires and PSPS. With that, I'll hand it over to Traeger Cotton to talk about customer programs and resiliency.
Thanks, Shinji. Traeger Cotton here. I'm on the customer service side of the house. My role is to consult with customers on projects you are looking to do on your side of the meter, specializing in resiliency and generators, solar, battery storage, cogeneration, microgrids, that type of thing. Thank you for your time this evening. Next slide, please. Okay, I want to first cover the resources and incentive programs that SE offers to mitigate the impacts of PSPS. In the first column, you can see that SE currently has 92 community resource centers, of which 9 are resilient, meaning they can operate even if the local power is down. For Kern and Tulare counties specifically, we have 11 contracted CRC sites, community resource center sites, and 7 temporary sites that are available to us for activation during PSPS. We also have 8 community crew vehicles that we can dispatch and 3 more on the way. And these vehicles are basically community resource centers on wheels, providing the same services. At these locations, customers can receive water, snacks, thermal bags for medication that needs to be kept cool. Customers can also charge mobile devices and medical equipment. And at those sites, we have accommodations to support customers with access and functional needs, as well as language translation services. And for those customers that have difficulty getting to one of those locations, we offer additional support through our 211 partnership, which I'll speak to here in a minute. We've worked with local communities that are frequently impacted by PSPS to establish resiliency zones. These zones are targeted for rural communities at businesses that provide essential services, such as a grocery store or gas station. And to date, there are 8 locations, one of which is in Tehachapi. And at these locations, SE provides backup generation. Shifting to the middle column has a list of our resiliency rebates and programs. First up is the Critical Care Battery Program, which provides free batteries augmented with solar panel to customers enrolled in the Medical Baseline Allowance Program that are also located in high fire risk areas. And so we have a team that assesses the needs of these customers and delivers the hardware directly to the customers. Next up is the in-event battery loan program for customers that either don't qualify or haven't taken advantage of the Critical Care Battery Program, but they do have a need for powering medical or assistive devices during a PSPS event. SE will coordinate the drop-off and pickup of batteries at customers' homes. Moving on, and this speaks to the question that we received from Donna in the chat, we offer a $200 rebate on portable generators for residential and non-residential customers located in high fire risk areas. And these are portable generators, that you operate on gas or diesel, and you pull them out or roll them out when an outage occurs. And the rebate's $600 for qualifying customers that are in our CARE or FARA program or our medical baseline programs. We have a $150 rebate for portable power stations for customers in high fire risk areas. These are these lithium-ion battery bricks from companies like Goal Zero or Jackery or Westinghouse, have USB or 120 volt outlets. And since 2020, SE has issued over 7,000 rebates for portable power stations and generators, and has distributed close to 19,000 backup batteries to medical baseline customers residing in the higher fire risk areas. The next up is the Self-Generation Incentive Program, which provides incentives for larger battery energy storage systems that are interconnected to your panel. This is like the Tesla, the LG, the Panasonic wall-mounted home systems, or larger whole business systems. I should mention that program, the SGIP program, has limited funding and will close to new applications at the end of this year, except for low-income qualified residential customers, for which there's a new bucket of money that recently opened up for solar plus storage systems, and it's really good, really lucrative if you qualify. Finally, we have a microgrid incentive program, which it has incentive funding for more complex multi-customer microgrids that serve disadvantaged communities that are at high risk of outages. So it's a rather narrowly focused program. Okay, I realize that's a lot of program related information. We have a resources slide coming up that links to these programs, and the deck will be provided. So the last column includes information on access and functional needs resources and outreach during a PSPS, including our partnership with 211. It's like dial on your phone 211, and the Disability Disaster Access and Resource Program. Those programs link customers to transportation, battery backup, lodging, fuel, food assistance during an event. We encourage our customers with access and functional needs to dial 211 during a PSPS event or use their app for personalized support. We also assist customers, the 211 service assists customers to build out or enhance their emergency plans. Okay, we work with food banks to support food replacement programs during PSPS activations. And finally, SCE supports customers with access and functional needs, emergency preparedness by leveraging our community-based organizations. We have a great relationship with our CBO partners, and we meet regularly to try to increase medical baseline enrollments. And we have 12 CBOs in Kern and Tulare counties. They're actively engaged during PSPS events. So next slide, please. Okay, next we're going to shift gears and talk about resiliency solutions on your side of the meter and customer side of the meter. We always recommend that our customers have a resiliency plan in place for when the power goes out, either by PSPS or any emergency outage. We realize that many of you have already experienced a PSPS outage, so you've already thought through these tips in real time. For those of you who haven't, here's some tips, specifically with business customers in mind. So I'll zero in on a couple of these. We often hear from customers that their backup equipment was not ready when the outage occurred. Batteries weren't charged, emergency lighting didn't work, generator carburetor was plugged, out of fuel. So as part of your resiliency plan, include that periodic testing. It's critical periodic testing of batteries or replacement of batteries, check emergency lighting, fire up the generator, replace the fuel. In short, include maintenance in your resiliency planning. And it would also be a good idea to include employee training, if applicable, so that there are clear roles and responsibilities during an outage. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's talk about the most widely used form of backup, the internal combustion engine generator. This is really the workhorse of resiliency, and backup generators and associated refueling strategies should be considered as part of any resiliency plan. I'll zero in on a couple of these. Backup generators must meet electrical codes and be disconnected from the grid during an outage to prevent dangerous backfeeding of electricity onto SCE's power our grid. Backfeeding onto the lines can endanger the lives of electrical workers who may be working on the lines at the time. So always consult a licensed electrician to determine the right equipment and safe setup. And prior to installing a backup generator that is interconnected to your electrical system, like to your panel, an application for interconnection needs to be submitted so that we know where those are and how they're isolated from the grid during an outage. Okay, lastly, I'll just say that there's inherent safety risks with generators, and you're dealing with gas or propane or diesel and electricity, and sometimes in inclement weather, as well as carbon monoxide. So have a safety protocols in place for operating those generators. And this may be obvious too, but it's worth mentioning that the size and the associated cost of the generator is directly related to the size of the loads that it serves. So the size and the cost can be reduced by separating out those critical loads that need to be on during an outage. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about microgrids. This is a hot topic right now. So what is a microgrid? Well, in short, it's a combination of generation and electrical loads that can operate independently from the grid during an outage by balancing that generation and your usage. So why consider a microgrid over other backup solutions? Well, a microgrid can provide that backup during an outage, but it can also operate in blue sky mode in parallel with the grid. So blue sky meaning like the grid is healthy, the power's on. So it can operate in parallel with the grid, providing rate savings by peak shaving or load shifting or participating in demand response programs. Also, typically microgrids are powered with renewable generation and enhanced with energy storage. Again, both of which have blue sky benefits and can be part of a larger decarbonization plan, or while also providing backup. We have a landing page on sce.com specifically for microgrids. And on that page, there's a link to a best practices fact sheet that's great for microgrids. There's a direct link here on this slide when the deck goes out. And I'll end with this, that there's a whole host of small resiliency solutions available, like power banks to charge cell phones, solar powered emergency radios, small uninterrupted power supplies like for your computer, battery backed screw in A lamps, LED lanterns, those kind of devices. And we recommend having some of those on hand for an outage. And that's it for me. I'll hand it off to Christy for Q&A.
Hey, thanks so much, Traeger, and thank you everybody for joining us tonight. My name is Christy Fanous. I'm the Vice President of Customer Experience and Performance here at Southern California Edison. We appreciate your attention throughout the presentation this evening. I know we may have felt a little rushed going through it. We apologize for that. We wanted to make sure that we allowed plenty of time for Q&A. And so if you feel rushed, we have plenty of time for Q&A. We'd love to be able to answer your questions. We will be sending these slides out as well as this session is being recorded. So know that all the information will be available in a couple days on our website. We now invite you to participate in our active Q&A. This is an opportunity to dive deeper into the topics that we've discussed. Just as a reminder, the raised hand feature is not enabled this evening. We have a number of people on the virtual call, and so we will be facilitating the questions through the chat. So please click the Q&A icon and select Ask a Question, and then type in your question. We will do our best to get through all of the questions this evening. An additional feature I wanted to highlight is you can vote or upvote any comment that has already been asked. So if you see a comment that you like, click the up arrow. And what that does for us is we'll go in order of the most highly voted questions. So we want to make sure that we are getting to the questions that are of most interest. So please do that. And like I said, we will answer as many questions as we can. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And let's see here. I'm going to do the upvote. Okay, so the first question is from Tom McKinney. Tom, thank you for I think you asked a couple questions here, and it looks like we have an SCE alum on the line. I was the manager of the Kernville district from 1975 to 1991, and I never had to de-energize a circuit due to the weather. So Tom, thank you for your comment. I'm going to invite Tom Orlinsky to join us here for a moment. But what I would share, Tom McKinney, is that quite a bit has changed. First of all, thank you for your years of service to Edison. Secondly, quite a bit has changed since 1991. We have seen severe drought weather, lack of moisture, and the wildfire risk has increased significantly. We've seen a number of wildfires over the last 5 or 10 years, and so the world as we know it is no longer. But with that, I would like Tom Orlinsky to come on, our fire scientist, to share a little bit more about why we are needing to de-energize circuits given the climate conditions. So Tom, if you can join.
Yes, again, good evening. Thank you for the question. That's a great question. I think I think Christy did a great job starting to answer the question there. Again, we've seen a lot of changes in wildfire activity across not only across our service territory, but really across the whole state of California due to a whole number of reasons, right? We've had just, extended drought conditions, particularly in the period from 2013 to 2017 was a very severe drought across California that led to really a lot of tree mortality across up and down the Sierra. Some places had 100% tree mortality in the Sierra. So that left a lot of dead vegetation that was available to burn. So we started to have a lot of big fires across portions of the Sierra back in the 2010s and kind of extending into the 2020s. Again, we've had more extreme weather conditions across the area. We've had a lot of buildup of vegetation across a lot of California in areas that haven't burned in a long time. So those are obviously that's concerning as well. And we haven't done the company started doing PSPS in 2018. I think that was the first time we had a PSPS event. So prior to that, even though we had wildfire mitigations in place within the company, the Public Safety Power Shutoff program wasn't part of that at that time. And so that's what has kind of led to obviously more de-energizations of the grid. So hopefully that answers your question, Tom.
Great, thank you, Tom. Both Toms for the question and for the response. The next question was from Karen Northcutt, so thank you, Karen. And I'm going to give this one to my colleague, Ted Gribble. The question is, when will the system be upgraded with fully covered circuits? I'm sorry, I think I'm going to give this one to Shinjini. When will the system be fully upgraded with fully covered circuits in the tungsten circuits to reduce PSPS? I think Shinjini touched on this during her presentation, but I'll turn it over to her so she can touch on it again.
Thank you. So far we have completed installation of 4 miles of covered conductor on tungsten. An additional 20 miles of covered conductor will be completed this year. And then there is a small portion, about 2 miles, that we are undergrounding, which will be slated to be completed next year. And once those are done, then the entire tungsten circuit will be hardened. And at that point, we can raise the wind speed thresholds.
Fantastic. Thanks, Shinjini. The next question is also from Karen, and this is the one I think I'm going to hand off to my colleague, Ted Gribble. Can the public access the various circuit locations map? And Ted, I think you can take this one. Ted, you're on mute.
Sorry, that's what you get for calling me out. I'm a manager in our PSPS programs area. That information of the circuits and kind of where you are and what circuit you're connected to, it's something that we're working to incorporate into our outage map on our website. But for now, there is a location that you can also look it up. It's not integrated into our outage map yet, but it's I think we can just might be better for us to just put the link in the chat. I think it was actually listed as an answer to your question in the chat, but it's drpep.sce.com, Dr. Pep at sce.com. And you'll see it's a basic sort of Google Maps looking type of tool. It'll pull up all the circuits and you can put in your address and see what line is close to you and click that line and it'll say the name of your circuit.
Awesome. Thank you, Ted. Yeah, we'll put that in the chat because I know that came fast. Next comment was from Tom. I think this is a comment. You've spent $1 million and change in changing out bare wire to insulate to reduce fire hazard. Yeah, actually, we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars across our service territory to install insulated covered conductor to reduce the risk of flying objects hitting our lines and causing an ignition. So thank you for the acknowledgement there. Another comment from Tom. The station at Paradise Cove is really a wind tunnel. I think there is more to say about this one. I don't recall who was going to take this, if it was Ted or Tom. Go ahead, Ted. I see you came off mute.
Yeah, that would be Christy. And you're right, that is a local ridge top and gets a lot of high gusts, but of course we have exposure there because that's where the tungsten goes up and over. It may have been called the flycatcher back in your day, Tom. I don't know. I know we've changed the names of circuits in that area. But actually this area, we know that. And so we actually, the undergrounding project that Shinjini mentioned is going to move the line off of that ridge and down along the highway. It's a really complex project. All undergrounding projects are, especially when they're on a highway. And we're working really closely with Caltrans and a whole bunch of other agencies on doing that as quickly as we can. But it's currently scheduled to be done next year.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it, Ted. Okay, this next one, and Ted, we might keep you on here. This next one is from Lisa Robinson. While your text and email notifications are nice, they usually come after the fact. Can you fix?
So it's difficult to know exactly. Every situation is a little bit different. I think that you may be one of our customers in the Three Rivers area. We did have what we refer to internally as a rogue circuit come into a PSPS criteria. And what that means is that the weather conditions became, above their criteria necessitating PSPS outside of a forecasted period. So everything Tom said is true. Our forecasts are very accurate, but no weather forecast is perfect. And this is a case where we were not expecting those winds, and so we couldn't provide those early notifications. Shinjini mentioned it very briefly in her comments, but we do monitor the system 24/7. And this was an instance where, as we were monitoring, the conditions came up and we acted as quickly as we could, and then sent notifications also as quickly as we could. But recognize it in cases like that, they sometimes are after the fact.
Thanks, Ted. The next question came out from S. Sanchez, and I'm going to have Traeger assist me on it, but let me read it. It's if SE had historical data on wind and gust speeds in the area and knew that wind speeds would periodically surpass the PS thresholds, why weren't resources already deployed and available until after several days of outages? Shouldn't SE have set up community resource centers in advance? Traeger, can you take a shot at this one?
Yeah, I'll chime in and welcome my colleagues to chime in here too. Yes, so our typical protocol is to open up community resource centers on the first day of the event and have them open through the entirety of the event. If we had a miss, we appreciate that feedback and we'll elevate that. We try our best. But you're right, we did have historic wind data. We did have info on weather data. We should have opened those CRCs.
Thank you. And I know, Trigger, we do our best, and sometimes the weather changes on us. So sometimes, it comes sooner than we expect, and we aren't able to deploy as quickly as we can. But obviously, we're continuing to improve our processes. And Trigger, I'm going to have you stay on if that's okay. The next question is from Donna. How can I get help to purchase a generator when I don't have the cash to pay for it first? Thank you, and God bless.
Yeah, so I would direct to the resources, the rebates that I mentioned to help defray the cost of a generator purchase. However, if you can qualify or do qualify for one of our medical baseline allowance programs, and you have access to that critical care battery backup program or an elevated rebate for a generator.
Okay, great. Thank you, Traeger. There's another one on here, Traeger. I'm just going to keep you on if that's okay.
Yep.
This one is from Christine Kirby. Thank you, Christine. What is an interconnective agreement in reference to a microgrid?
Oh, okay. So generation resources that are interconnected to your panel and therefore interconnected to our grid require an application. That application in the context of a microgrid would be for probably solar and storage, and you would be required to submit a single line diagram, specifications about the equipment. Our folks would review that. make sure it's in compliance, and issue a permission to operate. And the things that we look at are safety concerns and grid reliability concerns.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see here. I've got a couple other questions that have come through. So one from Karen Zuber. And it looks like it's around which 4 miles have been completed. So I'll probably have either Shinjini or Ted help me with this one. What area 4 miles have been completed? Does this make that area to be excluded from PSPS going forward? Will each area of the 20 miles be excluded upon completion?
That's a great question. Yeah, and sorry, I could take that. So it's actually only 4 miles this year. We've actually installed quite a lot more cover conductor than that on the tungsten circuit since the start of installing cover conductor. And again, another, I think it was 20 that is planned for this year. Unfortunately, none of the segments on the tungsten circuit are completely covered yet. We try our best to do it all at one time, but sometimes operationally that can't happen. So until each segment is completely covered, it will retain the thresholds of bare conductor, since we sort of have to treat it like it's a weakest link. However, what you suggested in your comment is true. Once that segment is covered, it would have higher thresholds, and assuming the winds were stayed under that, which generally they do in this area, it would no longer be subject to PSPS. But I will caveat that in that when Shinjini displayed the map of the circuit, sometimes if you have to de-energize what we call an upstream segment, so closer between you and the substation, so to speak, that may still impact you if that segment's not covered. Now, I think Shinjini may have also mentioned we do have options. We have neighboring circuits, and in fact, on the tungsten circuit in the sort of Mountain Mesa, Squirrel Mountain Valley, and South Lake communities, we're able to, assuming the winds cooperate and it's only windy on that one weather station that Tom was referring to, we can transfer those communities over to a circuit that's fed out of the east side of the lake, out of Weldon. So that actually was implemented once in July. Part of the tungsten circuit was de-energized, but those communities weren't affected at that time. So those are some of the things we can do, and we are doing, and like we also mentioned, we're doing everything we can to try to expedite all the rest of the hardening work on the tungsten.
Thank you, Ted. Hey, we've gotten some messages that some folks have been having a hard time experiencing some technical questions trying to post a question. So if you are experiencing technical difficulty posting a question, or you have an additional question that has not been answered during the call, or have additional questions related to wildfire PSPS, please email us. Sorry, if you can go back one slide, please email us. And we put this in the chat at wildfireoutreach@sce.com. So I'll read that again. If you're having technical difficulties and are unable to post a question in the chat, please email us at wildfireoutreach@sce.com. Do want to make sure that we get to every question. So we apologize if anybody's having technical difficulties. We're seeing a number of questions come through, but it does sound like some folks are having a challenge. So one more time, that email address is wildfireoutreach@sce.com. Some additional questions have come in, so I want to make sure that we touch on them. Lisa Robinson, you had a couple questions. I live in Kern River Valley, and I'm assuming this is around the notifications. They come late most of the time. We are working on that in terms of getting our notifications out in a timely manner. So we apologize if they've been coming late. Again, we try to anticipate what the weather will be. Sometimes the reason for those notifications coming late is because the weather changes and the winds come sooner than we expect. And so that makes it a challenge to get the notifications out in time. Another question from Lisa is, so we have to prepare for PSPS for a couple years until the circuit is hardened. Yes, regardless of a PSPS incident, we do recommend that everybody be prepared for an outage, whether it's an earthquake or another situation. But yes, the recommendation, we went through a number of things that we recommend doing to prepare for a PSPS incident until we're able to harden the circuit. We recognize that's an inconvenience. Needless to say, we're working as fast as we can to harden the various circuits that are in our high fire service areas. All right, the next question is from Karen Northcutt. As a volunteer at the KRV Senior Citizens, Inc., we received lots of calls in our office about the lack of functioning of the 211 system. People were on hold for hours and never got a response. This was bad for seniors needing assistance. This need was for transportation, food assistance, no way to store food delivered for Meals on Wheels, no way to cook the meals that were delivered. Can SCE have a local help center where folks can come to get assistance to sign up for various programs? Many do not have cell phones and do not have access to those services. Well, first off, Karen, I apologize for that experience. I'm going to ask Traeger to jump on and help, but needless to say, we want to make sure that we are taking care of our communities and especially our senior citizens and the services that we want to be able to provide through the 211 service. So let me turn it over to Traeger to see if he can add some additional content for us.
That's not the standard that we hold ourselves to. So we'll thanks for the feedback. We'll certainly look into it. As for programs and support, we do have the Disability Disaster Access and Resource Program that offers similar assistance. And as far as signing up for programs, we have our in-event community resource centers and crew vehicles with personnel that can help you sign up. We also have our online resources. And then the last I'll say is we have our call center to help you sign up.
Great, thank you, Traeger. And again, that's not the standard we hold ourselves to. So if that's an issue, we will commit to working on that because we want to make sure that we're providing the necessary resources. Another question from Tom. You have replaced most of the distribution lines. How about the transmission lines? I'm going to see if Ted or Shinjini can help me with this one.
Yeah, I can answer that one. So you're right. When we set our energization thresholds, it has to do with the hazards that face the different specific line designs. As you know, Tom, transmission lines generally are higher up in the air. They have larger spacing between the wires, the different phases. They have longer insulators, and that makes them less likely to experience outages related to things blowing into them or falling into them. And for that reason, generally we have higher wind speed thresholds for transmission and subtransmission lines. And in this case around the lake, the winds typically do not exceed those thresholds, and therefore again, generally speaking, there's no guarantees because we can't predict how the weather may change in the future. The transmission system around the lake is safe from PSPS.
Thanks, Ted. Okay, we have a couple more questions that have come in, so I'm going to continue working through these. So this is from Brian. Thank you, Brian. Following the Erskine fire in the summer of 2016, Edison and its contractors, outsource, have been making infrastructure repairs. For 10 years, these improvements have seemed to continue. Why is infrastructure improvement taking so long? Shinjini, would you be able to answer that one, or Ted? I'm happy to reread it if that's of help.
Would you please?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is from Brian, and it's around the infrastructure and why. I'll just read it. Following the Erskine fire in the summer of 2016, Edison and its contractors, outsource, have been making infrastructure repairs. For 10 years, these improvements have seemed to continue. Why is the infrastructure improvement taking so long?
Yeah, I will. Thank you for the question. And actually, this is something that we deal with all the time. And won't be able to comment on this particular project. We can look into it. But in general, there are several reasons that overall, infrastructure work takes a long time. We're doing work across our system, and so we have to prioritize where we see that there is the highest risk and where we have crews available, other personnel available, and so getting through programs across the area sometimes takes multiple years, a decade. In particular locations, sometimes work can get held up because of permitting, easements, etc. And when we're working with agencies, other agencies, external agencies, to get the appropriate, permits to do the work, and uh, um, they're following their processes, and oftentimes, unfortunately, it does take a very long time to get this through. We work diligently with these agencies. We, try to expedite the work as much as possible, because of course we're doing all this work to reduce risk. So, like those are a couple, like for specific projects, it often takes longer because of permitting and getting easements from customers, etc., so that we can do the work. And then in more globally for the system itself, we are, as you can imagine, doing a lot of work. So just to give you a sense, we have over 4,500 distribution circuits on our system. About 1,100 of them are in high fire risk areas, and we are replacing covered bare conductor and putting in covered conductor. We're doing undergrounding. We're putting in all kinds of different devices. And beyond just wildfire mitigation, there's a lot of other work that's ongoing, as you can imagine. So all of this, getting through all of this does take time.
Thank you, Shinjini. Next question is from Tasha Olson, and this is around the PSPS notification. So let me read it. I'd like to expand on Lisa Robinson's comment question. I believe what she is saying is that we do receive preliminary warning of a PSPS event in the Kern River Valley. However, when the notice goes out that says we will likely lose power in the next 4 hours, the power actually goes out within minutes, not hours. While I realize this falls within the notice's parameters, it would be helpful to all if we had more than a few minutes to wrap up any power-related activities we are in the middle of. I myself have been in the middle of running a washer, dishwasher, and cooking when we lost power. Yes, Tasha, thank you. Ideally, we are providing sufficient notice. We all can relate in terms of wanting to wrap up any power activities before the power goes out. We are continuing to try to refine and provide as much ample notice as possible. There are instances where the wind comes sooner than we expected or forecasted, and we do have to turn off the lights earlier than we expect. But we hear you, we understand the frustration, and know that we'll continue to work on providing as much ample notice as possible. So thank you for sharing. Next question is from Danae Williams. As I understand, our major wind reader is on the northeast end of Lake Isabella, 12 miles away, which is right on the wind tunnel for the valley. How can the main reader of concern be moved closer to Kernville? So I'm going to ask, I think it's Tom Rolinski maybe to help take this one, unless Ted is going to take it, but would appreciate somebody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can take it. I talked to Tom really briefly on the side. So you're talking, I believe, about the Kernville area. We call that circuit the Bonanza circuit. That was one of the slides that Shinjini went over earlier. You're right in that the weather station that most often triggers a de-energization on the Bonanza circuit is a little bit higher to the or sort of in the northeast side of town. It's also right at where that circuit is fed from. So as I kind of described in an earlier answer to a question, when that circuit or when that part of the circuit is impacted by PSPS, it will affect everything downstream of it, including the main town. But I did note when we were preparing for this, looking at the weather stations and the reasons for de-energization, the circuit, or there is another weather station further in town, and that one also has triggered a de-energization in the past. So you are right that one weather station seems to be typically the highest. It's an example of what Tom Rolinski was describing earlier, where the winds could be kind of fickle in this area, and you never know exactly where they're going to show up. So that's why we try to have so many and diversity in them. But we're trying to get the best situational awareness we can, and in that case, the winds were above our criteria at that location.
All right, thanks, Ted. This next question is from Russell, and I'm going to have Shinjini take this one. My power has been shut off at 1 a.m. for seconds and then flipped back on. I've had it off for 5 minutes, then flipped back on. I've had it off for 20 minutes and then flipped back on. It's happened when SE has said they didn't need to shut off the power, and sometimes it's been blamed on the weather. If the weather is bad, why are you shutting it off and then turning it back on in a matter of minutes? It's inconsistent. How do you justify turning it off and on within a matter of seconds and minutes and blame it on the weather? This seems like mismanagement and failure, not weather. It's from Russell. Thank you, Russell, for your question. Shinjini, I'll go ahead and have you take this one.
Thanks, Russell. So again, I apologize ahead of time if this gets technical, more technical than I'd like it to be. But when we say weather, all weather is not fire weather or weather under which conditions we would have a PSPS related event, a de-energization or outage. Sometimes there are outages that from weather for other reasons. And the way our system is constructed, in many of our circuits, we have automated equipment. So what happens is if let's say a tree limb or a palm frond or something, a tarp flies into our line, this is not because of PSPS weather, just in general for something else, or there's something else touched our transformer or a fault happened for whatever reason, then the power goes off for a few seconds, and then the system tests itself to say, is that condition that led to a fault still there? Because oftentimes the faults clear themselves, and if it does, then the power comes back on. So this happens within like 30 seconds or so. There's a whole routine that the automated equipment go through, and if it goes off when the fault happens, and then it checks again to see is the fault condition still there, and if the fault condition is not there, the power will come back on. Sometimes it might take, like you said, 20 minutes because it was something small that remotely our field personnel could see what happened and fix the issue. So, and then of course we have these longer outages associated with PSPS. If you called in and the answer was weather, it was not because of like the fire weather conditions that lead to PSPS. It was something else, such as rain, high heat, where there might be, an overload condition and for a few seconds or something else. So it could still be weather related, but something different than fire weather related.
Awesome. Thank you, Shinjini. Okay, the next question I'm going to have Traeger assist me with. This is from S. Sanchez. Can SE provide loaner battery backups for the senior community if there's going to be continued outages? Many individuals do not have resources to buy a generator, and having hundreds of gas/diesel power generators in Kern River Valley seems like it would increase the fire risk more than the wind itself. Also, if the power is out, many individuals won't be able to purchase gas at their nearest gas station to run the generators.
Yeah, I'll start here. So our DDAR and 211 programs, which I touched on earlier, assist and support seniors with backup battery support, loaner, in-event loaner program, and transportation and food vouchers, fuel vouchers, and lodging if needed, and other support resources. So if those particular assistive measures need to be taken, those DDAR and 211 programs are there to support. So make it clear what your needs are.
Great, thank you, Traeger. We got a couple questions via email, so I'm going to try to touch on a couple here. This is from Trish Throbe. She indicated that she was having technical issues, so no Q&A button. So her question is, I'm so typically frustrated. I spent the time tonight for the Q&A, and I've been following and providing customer participation since 2018. I'll submit all my questions later as none were asked after I sent the reset. So Trish, we apologize. It looks like the chat is working for several people, but not working for others. So we will try to see what's going on. But please know, Trish, feel free to send an email, any question you have, even outside of this live stream. We will make it a point to get back to you. And we apologize for the technical issues that you've experienced here. Let me check with the team to see if there are any other published questions. I think we have gone through these. All right, there are some other questions that came through via email. We will try to move through them quickly. Oh, Carla, I see you hop on. Did you want to hop on here?
No, I was just going to say I'm happy to read the long one, Christy. If you want, there's a series of questions. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to
No
find out.
problem. I'm happy to take them. We can switch over. These are the ones that came via email. So, okay. Yeah, no problem. We have a series of questions. Let's start with the first one, and Shinjini, I'll have you respond to this one. How dare SCE and its regulator, the PUC, California Public Utilities Commission, threaten the livelihoods of our town with this willy-nilly power shutoff policy? Explain your method if you actually have one, and why, after the June fiasco, when you shut off power, even though there was no wind, why you should be allowed to play God with our electric power. So appreciate the question. I think this came from Margaret Roberts of Three Rivers. So Shinjini, do you want to take this one?
Yes, thank you, Margaret, for the question. As I was talking about before, I am not sure if you caught some of that, but we do have very specific protocols that we follow. And when we undertake PSPS, we look at a very granular weather and also the fire potential, meaning how there are a lot of different factors that go into it. A big chunk of it is about how dry the vegetation is, so that if there's an ignition there for whatever reason, it can spread quickly. And then of course we look at wind speeds. And then we take into account a lot of other factors, such as how the circuit is constructed, what kind of equipment is on the circuit, is it bare conductor or covered conductor, etc., and then other conditions on the ground. So there is a very robust method that we have our teams go through to determine whether a PSPS outage is necessary or not. We look at these protocols every single year, sometimes even between, every single month, every single week, to see what we can do differently, because we are constantly trying to make sure the communities are safe, but at the same time reduce the outages, the PSPS outages to the extent feasible. These protocols are also shared transparently with our regulators. They go through it, they look at it, we share it during events, and we also make it available in reports that we have to file after every event. And so it's not something that it's just Edison has come up with and is using it, but it's something that is both shared and reviewed by regulators and others so that we can get feedback and make sure we're doing the right thing.
Great, thank you, Shinjini. The next one, these are several questions came in from Margaret, so we want to make sure we get to them. The next one, I'll have Tom help with. Will SE share the data platform being used to make these shutoff calls so that we can access the same data and understand what, if any, logic there is to these shutoffs? So Tom, can you go ahead and take this one?
Yeah, in terms of sharing the data, absolutely. We do all of our weather observations, all of the data that comes from our weather stations, that's all online. I think we can post that for the folks here online to get that the website. And again, you can track the weather along with us during PSPS events to see how the weather is changing and in the different areas. I'm sorry, was there another part of the question that I might have missed here, or was that the main question?
Yeah, the main question, and obviously we do our forecasting 3 days in advance. We have meteorologists involved, and then 3 to 6 hours before the start of the period of concern, we do additional updates. But to your point, yes, we have a website, se.com/weather stations, that everyone's welcome to view and take a look at, and it's publicly available information. Okay, great, thank you. The next question is, will SE agree to an in-person town hall meeting in Three Rivers so our community can have some accountability for these power outages? You control every bit of the information flow in a digital meeting as you control every bit of our electric power. You haven't earned our trust. We need a show of actual personal accountability. We ask question, you answer in person. Yes, we're happy to have an in-person meeting, happy to work with your local officials to see what would work best. We opted for a virtual meeting today because we had a very large group of customers spread over a very large geographic area. And we wanted to make sure that we got our information out as quickly as possible to the largest number of customers. So that is the reason we opted for a virtual meeting today, so that we could reach a group of customers that are spread out over a pretty large geographic area. But if there's a desire for an in-person meeting, as I mentioned, we're happy to work with your local county officials or public officials to help us facilitate and be able to answer any questions you have. Next question, we have time for just a couple more. So let me see if I can get to the remaining 2 or 3 here. And Carla, I will give this one to you. Will SCE assign a person with a name and a phone number who will be responsible to us during each and every minute of any power outage inflicted in our community? And please stop with the de-energizing gobbledygook. You're shutting us down. Otherwise, we are your helpless victims, and that's not right.
Thank you for this question, Christy. And I did want to reiterate, we understand that this is really tough, and I know that that is not the answer you want to hear. In terms of an assigned person with a name and phone number, that isn't something right now that we're prepared to do from a resource standpoint, but I do want to flag, and Christy is going to share this soon, we're going to share a list of resources. The best place you can call is our customer support number. It's our 1-800-655-4555. In addition to that, this is where, going to our community resource centers is that go-to place in the community that can serve as, a place where you can get those resources that are available to you, charge your cell phone if that is what you need. So please know that we try to push these out and make these available. We will continue to take this feedback back in terms of how we can better resource you in terms of a name and phone number. But at this time, we're not able to provide that.
Okay, thank you, Carla. Ted, I'm going to have you take this next question. Will SCE make an investment in additional crews and get serious about this outrageous 8-hour power restoration time? Are you kidding? You break it, you buy it. Figure out a way to restore power in more like 10 minutes, even if you need to hire crews times 10. That's your problem. You're the utility company making money hand over fist at our expense. So Ted, can you go ahead and take this one?
Yeah, so we've put out some videos describing what it takes to restore power after the winds subside, but it really does require us to get eyeballs on the entire circuit, the part of the circuit that was de-energized, because in case some tree limb or something is now hanging on that wire, we really don't want to re-energize and potentially cause another issue. And so that is what ultimately leads to that restoration time. Given that this was in Three Rivers, I did dig into the data around the outage that you guys experienced in the middle of June there. This won't be the most satisfying answer to you, but what happened is once the wind subsided, we started doing a patrol in the daylight, and then the winds came back. So we paused the patrol and we restarted the patrol after the winds came down again. And it's a pretty rugged area. It took a while to finish. So I think in that case, that was about a 9-ish hour restoration time. Generally, they're a lot shorter, especially when circuits are much easier to patrol, less rural and rugged. However, to your point, we are making changes internally with our air operations division to be able to free up our helicopters to expedite patrols. We're starting to invest more heavily in and lean more into the use of drones to conduct patrols. We're able to sometimes in some locations fly a circuit automatically with a drone and quickly review the video to confirm that there are no trees on the line. So while I can't say 10 minutes is practical, especially for every circuit, we are looking at doing what you say, investing in reducing those restoration patrol times. But frankly, we do have to do those patrols and get confirmation that there's no issues on the circuit.
Thanks, Ted. Okay, this is the last question from Margaret. Thank you for taking the time to send these ahead of time. And Shinjini, I'll have you take this one. Will SE commit to a substantial $100,000, sounds like a nice round number, penalty to be deposited in a community escrow account for every needless power outage, or power outage alert you inflict on this community, as you did today, July 10, requiring businesses to jump through hoops of scheduling for employees, gas, supplies. No win, you pay us $100 grand. Do the right thing.
Thank you for the question and comment. I'll repeat something that you heard today. We understand how difficult it is. I know it's not easy to hear this and say, what are you doing about it? At the end of the day, just like we have a responsibility to make sure we provide power, we also have a responsibility to keep you safe from the devastating impacts of wildfires, which unfortunately we have been seeing more frequently than any of us would like to see. PSPS does significantly reduce the risk that our equipment can start a fire during extreme weather conditions. These are, we are working really, really hard to improve your safety. We use PSPS only as a last resort. We are working day and night through weeks and months to do as much hardening as possible so that we can reduce the frequency of the PSPS events. We can reduce the number of customers who are impacted or how long they have to be out. As Traeger shared, we have other plans that we do to help you get prepared for emergencies or help you with backup batteries and generators, etc. We are continuing to invest heavily in resiliency measures in various makes sense because it is very much more expensive and takes a long time to underground lines, but we still try to do that in extreme risk areas. As I said, we are installing these insulated or covered conductors. We are clearing vegetation. We are doing inspections multiple times, sometimes in some locations in a year. And we're installing a lot of other technologies to reduce the risk. And like I said, we really would like to, and we do keep PSPS as low as possible, but there are times, and we're seeing more and more of this, that the weather is such, the conditions are such that we really have to keep our communities safe, and we have to unfortunately rely on this measure of like kind of last resort.
Awesome. Thank you, Shinjini. And thank you again, Margaret from Three Rivers, for taking the time to send the questions ahead of time. And I'm glad we were able to read those aloud and respond. We have reached our time, so I'm going to take one last question. It's from Danae Williams. I'm going to have Traeger help me with this one. Thank you for this virtual meeting. Another big takeaway for SC is that many, many people do not have any means of transportation. They cannot get to the resource centers, the lodging, etc. They are stuck at their home with no one to help them with meds or travel. To expect the poor and elderly people to be able to get into a car and get somewhere is unrealistic, let alone bring a small fuel-powered item into a home. Yeah, Traeger, can you go ahead and take a shot at this one? Obviously, this one's pretty heartbreaking to hear.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback. They say feedback is a gift, and we'll take that and discuss with our current resources and internally about how we can address that need. What we do have is our 211 and DDAR programs that offer transportation, food vouchers, fuel vouchers, lodging, support services, and then we have that in event battery loan program that may be considered for at least partially address the need here. So we thank you for your feedback. We continue to improve. We want to improve. We want to serve our communities that we live in. So I'll hand it back over to you, Chrissy. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I believe we got to almost most, if not all, the questions. So thank you for taking the time. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. There are a number of resources available to you. So I want to thank everyone for their time tonight, taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today and learn more about our grid hardening work and how we can all be prepared for a public safety power shutoff. We understand, as many of the presenters have talked tonight, about the PSPS outages have a significant impact on both residential and businesses in Kern and Tulare counties. We recognize the impact on the communities and the challenges and the hardships that these outages have caused. We're committing to supporting you through these times, these difficult times. As you can see, there are a number of resources that we are making available. Your resilience and cooperation are invaluable as we strive to enhance our services and ensure your safety. The slide you're seeing now has some helpful links and websites. We will be sharing this presentation material with you in a few days, so if you haven't captured it, not a problem. We will be sending this to you. Please keep a copy of this slide handy in case you need to reference later or share it with family or friends. With that, again, we recognize that this is impactful. I know there was another comment that came in that said, we're putting people at risk when the power goes out. We recognize that this can be a challenge, but we also recognize that we are attempting to save lives through our public safety power shutoff program. So we thank you for being with us tonight. Please be safe, and thank you for joining again tonight. And this concludes our live stream today. Thank you.